We're walking 10 miles while talking about what's actually happening on the border.
On the border.
No, not that one. The border.
Home of the creators.
Stop. The border has become voters' top concern in the 2024 election. We'll talk about why the crisis has gotten so bad, what is Biden actually doing about it, why hasn't it been resolved, and can Beyonce wear more clothes so that my mom can finally let me listen to her music? I'm a single lady and I want to put my hands up too.
The record high number of illegal immigrants crossing the Mexico border.
Today, the border crisis.
Unprecedented crisis.
The migrant crisis.
The border crisis.
Crisis at the border, where we've just learned migrant crossings in December shattered all previous records.
Migrant encounters on the southern border started skyrocketing in May of 2019 during the third year of the Trump presidency. And after a brief pause during COVID, they started surging at record levels starting 2021. In 2023 alone, there's 2.5 million encounters of migrants crossing the southern borderline with immigration officers. This has put an exorbitant amount of pressure on southern towns where migrant to immigration officer ratios reach 200 to 1. In sanctuary cities like this one in New York City, taxpayers are footing the bill to house migrants in luxury hotels like this one.
Here in New York, many migrants end up at the Roosevelt Hotel, one of the many taxpayer-funded migrant shelters.
For context, I pay $7,000 a month in rent in New York City to live underneath my roommate's bed. But for most migrants, detainment actually sucks. It involves sleeping in tents, sleeping outside on the street, sleeping in the cold, or in detention camps like this one. Now, many say this entire crisis is just because Joe Biden won't enforce the law.
Abbott says the Biden administration is refusing to enforce immigration laws.
Is that it's a disaster of the president's own design.
Joe Biden and Kamala Harris refuse to enforce the law.
Biden administration doesn't want to enforce America's immigration laws.
To which Joe Biden said,
I was going to put him
perfect. Now, it's not entirely true that Biden isn't enforcing the law, and we're not here to defend Biden. He's received a lot of bipartisan criticism about his handling of the issue. But before we get into Biden, let's talk about what's going on at our border.
On the border.
Are you kidding me? You've probably seen these videos of South Americans running across our southern perimeter and running away from law enforcement. And those depictions of the situation are not entirely accurate. Most migrants entering the country today aren't running away from the law, but towards it.
In the 1990s and 2000s, when people crossed the border, they were coming knowingly and intentionally illegally, and they tried to avoid contact with law enforcement. That's not what's happening now. What's happening now is you have minors, people under 18, or family groups coming, and they are seeking contact with the law because they want to enter the asylum system, where the law is on their side. They get to stay in the country pending a hearing, which can take years, decades.
In September 2023, most people entering were families with children. And citing gang violence or poor economic conditions back home, they're seeking refugee status in this country. And US law requires that anybody that comes to our country, whether legally or illegally or however, that is seeking asylum status has a right to a hearing. And that is the core aspect that is driving this entire crisis. Because of this law, no president can just simply turn people away when they come to our border. They have to be detained and processed first. So you might say, wait, but asylum laws have been this way for decades, so why is this happening right now? Historically, asylum was only really granted to political refugees, people who are escaping civil war or genocide. But in 2017, an economic collapse happened in Venezuela, and with the US opposing Venezuelan socialist leadership, they started taking in a lot of Venezuelans under the pretense that they were economic refugees. Between 2017 and 2019, Venezuelans made up the largest percent of those that were granted asylum status. And now, seeing that poverty was a reason to be granted economic refuge into the United States, many people from other countries started trying to seek asylum in the United States as well, including those from Central America, Southern America, and even from India. Now, let's talk Biden. Republicans who say Biden isn't enforcing the law miss the point that detaining and processing asylum seekers is the law. It's the same reason why when the first surge happened in 2019, Trump couldn't just turn them all away. To hear more about this, let's talk to Billy, the Trump supporting bear. So Billy, Biden has been a lot softer in immigration. He's reversed a lot of Trump-era immigration policies. He's been a lot more liberal on the issue overall. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I love Biden. He's making America great again.
Wait, what? You support Biden?
Biden has been tough on immigration. He immediately expelled 100,000 migrants a month without due process. That's much higher than Trump's 62,000 a month.
Okay, but wait, Biden received a lot of criticism for ending Title 42. It was the policy that allowed the president to turn away all migrant seekers because of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Don't let that fool you. Biden was continuing Title 42 expulsions 2 years after the pandemic was considered over and widespread vaccines were pretty much already available. Trump expelled 500,000 using Title 42. Biden expelled 2.3 million. Wow.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's really interesting, Billy.
Moreover, Biden has deported 142,000 in 2023. That's doubling his own figure from the year before, and far exceeding the 14,000 deportations in 2020 under Trump, though Trump did have a higher number in 2019. But you know who the real OG is? My boy Obama. He deported way more than any president before or after him, deporting 383,000 per year.
All right, thanks Billy the Trump supporting bear. Now, there are valid criticisms against Joe Biden in terms of policies that he did that contributes to the ongoing crisis. Like, for example, he ended the Remain in Mexico policy. He did that because there was evidence that crimes were happening against asylum seekers while they were waiting in Mexico. This was a Trump-era policy. The second is that he did also try to end Title 42 earlier than 2023, but the court stopped him because of the COVID-19 pandemic. The third is that he did willfully expand catch and release. That's the policy where immigration officers, when they find migrants, will detain them but then release them shortly after. Trump also tried to end this during his presidency, but because of the lack of resources that the immigration officers had, he had to end up expanding it also. And the worst one is that 27,293 pounds of fentanyl were confiscated at the border.
On the border!
Talking about serious stuff here, guys. At the border, just in 2023 alone. That's enough to kill 6 billion people, or just one of me. I'm built different like that. So why isn't this issue getting resolved? Well, if you asked Republicans in 2019, including Donald Trump himself, they said that the law needs to be changed.
An alien simply crosses the border illegally, finds a border patrol agent, and using well-coached language asserts the need for asylum. The overwhelming majority of claims are rejected. This endemic abuse of the asylum system makes a mockery of our immigration system, displacing legitimate asylum seekers.
The current policy that everybody who comes to this country to seek asylum should be given a hearing just requires too many resources that the United States Congress isn't willing to give. So in 2024, the US Senate passed a bipartisan immigration reform package that would have given the president the ability to limit asylum seekers. And that bill failed because of Republicans, who now said that the law doesn't need to be changed. They say that the laws on the books are enough for Biden to stop this crisis. All he needs to do is go and enforce them. The law they're talking about is the 1952 Immigration and Nationality Act, which says the president can restrict all immigration to the United States as he sees fit if there's a good reason to do it. This is what Trump used in 2017 to restrict all travel from 7 Muslim-majority countries. And the courts that said that he's allowed to do that using this law also said he's not allowed to use the same law to restrict asylum seekers. And this back and forth with the courts happened again and again in 2018, 2019, and 2020. So one of two things has to happen to solve this issue. Either the laws are changed and the presidents are allowed to turn away asylum seekers, or two, a huge amount of resources are invested into immigration control so that every single asylum case can be heard. But if neither happens, then this crisis will continue for years to come. We just walked over 10 miles, which honestly wasn't that crazy. But that's 0.3% of the distance. The average Venezuelan migrant will walk from their country 2 hours. For context, that's 2,700 miles, the distance between here and Los Angeles, or about the distance from one side of your mother to the other. And I say that because in this country, there's nothing we love more than hating on our own country. We'll say it's become a third world country. We'll say that it's full of systemic evils. We'll say the American dream is dead. And sure, there's some truth to all of that, but that perspective isn't shared by the millions who walk countless miles with all their belongings on their back just for the chance to be detained by this country. Since this country's conception, countless migrants have sacrificed everything to come here, not so they can have a better future, but so that their kids can. And the US is defined by it. No country takes in more immigrants every year or has a larger foreign-born population than ours. Now, I'm not saying that we need to take in more or less or anything. That's not for me alone to decide. But what I am saying is how lucky I am that all I had to do to get here was be born. Food for thought.